Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Jerry Reed here has not been here to tell us about his last day on this earth. He went to work that morning, went about his normal day, 70-something years old, trying to work and live out his life. But he didn't make it home to his wife that evening. Horrible events took place that took him prematurely from his family. He's not here to tell us exactly what happened, but through the witnesses that you've heard, his story has been told. We had his son-in-law come in to establish that yes, in fact, Mr. Ridge was the owner of the Valley Pawn Shop. That was his business. And he was there at work on May the 17th of 2016. According to Dale Watts, who was in there conducting business with Mr. Ridge on behalf of her grandson, her older grandson, and she made a payment for him, and the defendant was in there. This was around 3:30 that evening on May the 17th of 2016. And Miss Watts is a retired nurse, very familiar with rubber gloves. And you all heard her say exactly what got her attention. Angela Kilgore is in there with purple gloves on. They're a particular type of nitrile gloves that Miss Watts had used. Not latex, nitrile purple gloves. And that's important for several reasons, as you all learned as the trial went on. Not the least of which, purple glove is found there at the scene, collected and tested, and found to have blood. Obviously, I mean, we really probably didn't have to have an expert to say that. You all don't leave your common sense at the door when you go into the jury room. It's obviously covered in blood. But we did have an expert confirm that. And present on that glove, DNA of Jerry Ridge and Miss Kilgore. Todd Brown, the chief of the Whitwell Fire Department, happened to be on duty for his community that day, so he got to Valley Pawn Shop pretty quickly. He's there responding to a fire at 4:53 in the evening. They go in, they're trying to put out a fire. They immediately see where the fire originated and realize a heinous act has occurred and somebody's died there. So they back out, secure the scene, and additional law enforcement begins to arrive. Matt Blansett, a detective with the Sheriff's Department, comes in, and you all saw the pictures, immediately notices a bloody area on a receipt book. There's blood smeared down the counter, all over the receipt book, on the countertop. But he looks at the receipt book, and he sees a name, and the last receipt that was written on May the 17th of 2016 made out to Angela Kilgore. So, being a good detective, investigator, they follow up. They begin to gather more information. Detective Johnson is contacted. Detective Blansett phones and says, hey, look, what can you find out about this name? They had information that a red truck had been backed up to the front of the pawn shop. Well, lo and behold, Angela Kilgore has a red Chevrolet Colorado registered to her. They follow up, and Angela Kilgore has been back in and around the area. Darren Rogers from the Raceway came in and added his part to the story. He said he remembered Miss Kilgore, who he knew, coming in around 9 o'clock He made a phone call, passed along the information that she had been in there. He snapped a photo later on, and a rebel flag was on the front of her truck. That was important. Law enforcement follows up, comes over. Miss Kilgore's in the bathroom. I think he said around 15 minutes or so, maybe. They arrive. She's in there for a little while longer, comes out, and ends up with Agent Wilson. He made photographs of her hands. She had gauze on. He made photographs of her boots that she had on that very night. This was around 11:30, going on to midnight, the evening of May 17th, on into May the 18th. He also obtained a swab, a cheek swab, buccal swab, however you correctly pronounce it, and submitted these things into evidence. That part of the story becomes more important later on. Darren Rogers, one factor that he did not testify about, because she didn't have them on when she came into the raceway. She didn't have gloves on when she came into the raceway later that night. Laura Hodge, the violent criminal response team leader, testified about evidence that she collected there at the scene. She described the scene with the body in it. Markers are there, and they're documenting, collecting potential evidence, and not everything obviously turns out to be crucial evidence, but there were items collected that are extremely crucial in this case. Agent Hodge finds the bloody glove. They're dumped out of the white garbage can, dumped over, and items spilled out, not far from the body of Mr. Ridge. There's also collected the lighter fluid can, and that's submitted and tested. And Agent Hodge later did an examination on the bullet that was recovered from Mr. Ridge's body and identified it as a .25 caliber that was removed at autopsy from his body. That bullet caused terrible injury to his arm, and you heard Dr. Deering testify about that. Darby Hutchinson, special agent with the TBI, whose specialty includes fire and bomb investigation and cause and origin, testified about her observations there at the scene, what she observed, what her training and experience is. She described to you all about the fire originating there on Mr. Ridge's body and going out from there. She described, in her expert opinion, obviously this fire was set. This was an intentionally set fire, consistent with those ignitable liquids that were found. The other TBI agents testified about those, and certainly consistent with the fire patterns going out from Mr. Ridge's body and from the terrible charring beyond third-degree burns over almost all of his body as he lay there dead in the rubble of what was his business. Items were collected from the defendant after she was arrested on May the 19th. A collection of guns. Handguns that were on the FFL book collected by the officers, registered in Mr. Ridge's book, logged in with the description and the serial number, and still on the books as they testified to. which means would have been in his pawn shop. There were notations there of guns that were sold. None of those guns, with the exception of the BB gun, were not listed as still on the books of the pawn shop. 3 of those guns were submitted for further testing to TBI. Because to the naked eye, you can look at them, or the officers looked at them, and you all saw a photograph of one of them zoomed in of the guns that was sent particularly to the TBI. And found on those guns were blood at various locations. Those guns were all recovered from Miss Kilgore's possession from her truck on May the 19th, 2016. And you all will have copies of these TBI reports that Agent Berge prepared. And I have to make notes and go back and forth. They're a little hard to look at, but the TBI exhibits 54, 55, and 56, all with a small A out beside them. Pistol from the bag from the truck of the defendant, a revolver from the bag of the truck of the defendant, and a pistol and a magazine from the bag in the truck of the defendant. Those 3 guns had various locations of blood on them with a DNA match to the defendant, Angela Kilgore. Also collected from the front seat of her truck, y'all remember that kind of dark blue plaid shirt that was laying on the front seat. That was collected at the TBI crime lab by Agent Berge and tested by her. And because she had already obtained these DNA profiles of both the defendant, Ms. Kilgore, and Jerry Ridge, she's able to give these opinions about these, what we commonly call DNA matches. From the shirt, and it's TBI Exhibit 031A, she found several areas of blood. Blood on 7 areas. And you all remember from her testimony that she was able to obtain a DNA profile from the blood from those 7 areas. And she matched that DNA profile to Jerry Ridge, a mixture of Angela Kilgore and Jerry Ridge, and blood with a DNA profile match to Jerry Ridge inside the cuff of the front left sleeve. And if you think about all these things, about how that would have gotten there, that's part of the story. Brown leather boots, TBI exhibit number 048A, were introduced as an exhibit in the trial here for the last couple of days, several days. Those boots were worn by the defendant. This photograph was introduced. That photograph was made late night of May the 17th, 2016. Those boots are on her feet. May the 19th, she's taken into custody, booked in downstairs at the Marion County Jail. Those boots were on her. They're bagged into evidence and submitted to the TBI crime lab. Because they had a complete DNA profile already, they had obtained the DNA profile. Further testing was done. And there was blood found on 7 areas of those boots. That all came back to Jerry Ridge. And that report, page 3 of her official forensic biology report issued October 24th of 2016, sets forth, almost the whole page, sets forth that different areas that she found Mr. Ridge's blood all over the defendant's boots. Judge Ash has already instructed you as to the charges that we have presented to you and the elements or the factors that we have to prove for you to find Ms. Kilgore guilty. At the beginning of the trial, the state acknowledged that this is a heavy burden, but a burden that we gladly accept. And I submit to you we've proved each and every element of the main count of each of those indictments. The very first count is first-degree premeditated murder. Judge Ash has given you the instruction, and we talked about it a little bit before we even started the trial. Those elements include that we had to show, as to all the counts, that it occurred in Marion County. David Sharps testified that his father-in-law's business, Valley Pond, was in Whitwell, Tennessee, in Marion County. Chief Brown testified. He's been in the fire department, I believe, 30-something years. Just to be on the safe side, he confirmed also Valley Pond Shop is in Marion County. So venue was established by not one but 2 witnesses. Premeditated murder requires an intentional killing of the victim, Jerry Ridge. And intentional means that it was Angela Kilgore's conscious desire and objective to cause the death of Mr. Ridge. It's not necessary that that intent to kill was formed for any pre-existing definite period of time, just that it pre-existed before she killed him. Several things to consider about premeditation. Think about the location of the wounds to his body. There's a reason for the saying, go for somebody's jugular. They were really going for the jugular with that. That's exactly what she did. She severed his jugular. She shot him. Struck him in the right arm, causing hemorrhaging, a very significant injury, as Dr. Deering told you. We don't know which one came first, but Ms. Kilgore wasn't sure the first one did the job, so she took an additional step to finish him off. And beyond that, as he lay there bleeding, dying, passed away, she set about the business of setting the fire, setting the business on fire, setting his body on fire, left the bloody glove there because she never thought anybody would find it. Her intent was to burn the business up, so that wasn't going to be a problem. Thank goodness the fire department was right down the road and the officers were able to respond, so that we have that evidence, we have that proof, and we have that part of the story to present to you. Premeditation includes such factors as use of a deadly weapon on an unarmed person. Mr. Ridge was an elderly man that had open heart surgery or heart surgery, had horrible injuries to his body that led to his death. Miss Kilgore wasn't upset by all accounts. Darren Rogers said, well, she was pretty calm. She was strolling into the raceway. She went on about her business, gathered up her things. The officers found her May the 19th, several duffel bags in her truck, and the items she had robbed from Jerry Ridge. The experts that you heard testify have devoted many years of their life from their testimony to their part in investigations. They've studied hard, I'm sure, to obtain degrees like biology and chemistry, to talk about things that are hard to understand. But the important thing is they're able to talk about things that are hard to understand in a way that we can understand them. And that's what they did from this witness stand. They were able to explain the evidence that they found through their years of training and experience and the degrees that they obtained and the specialized training that they had to allow you to know what the story is. Law enforcement put in many hours. They did their job to find the truth about what happened so that those things could be presented to you. So even though Jerry Ridge hasn't been able to be here to tell his story to you all, you've heard his story. And everything about that leads to each of you having the ability to let your mind rest easy and knowing that these elements have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. As to the certainty of Angela Kilgore's death, of guilt in the death of Jerry Ridge, the aggravated arson of his business, the especially aggravated robbery, the taking of the guns by violence from him, causing him serious bodily injury and ultimately death. Through the witnesses, you've heard Jerry Ridge's story, and it's a horrible story, a horrible death, a horrible way to die. But at least we can see that his story will end with your verdict of guilty. His story will end with justice. Thank you.